made the right decision to abandon the Institute of Aviation. Sitting in front of his new computer, one of the most advanced machines he had ever interacted with, he could sense a universe of possibilities unfolding. It was a rare feeling for any intellectually curious young man in the early 1980s, and the Soviet Union presumed to be at the height of its powers. Here was a gleaming example of Soviet technology at its most advanced, the Electronica 60, a rack-mountable desktop computer that resembled a clunky piece of mid-century stereo equipment. The bulk of the body was hidden inside a steel rack, and only an off-white faceplate pointed out, instantly recognizable by its Russian name Electronica 60, in a bold red script across the top and a series of thick white switches that would not have looked out of place in an episode of Space 1999. But like most things in the Soviet Union at the time, scratch away the facade and you'd find that nothing is what it seemed at first glance. The Electronica 60, despite a smart-looking space-age industrial design, was just another Soviet knockoff of a more popular and better-made American product. In this case, internally it was a clone of the Digital Equipment Corporation's LSI-11 computer. That machine had been state-of-art in its day, but that day was 1975, and anyone at a research facility or university in the West would have considered it a dinosaur. Not only was this less than the modern hardware Alexei's space-sponsored explorations into artificial intelligence and other advanced computing topics required, but it was also somewhat less than the average early 80s American middle school student had access to in classroom computer labs. It was not the first time Alexei Leonidovich Pajitnov was faced with the double standard of life in the Soviet Union. He initially experienced it as a child, waiting behind the reassuring figure of his mother, the pair standing in yet another line. But it wasn't basic household goods or cheaply produced clothing they were queuing for. Instead, they eagerly awaited a chance to taste the forbidden fruit of what state-run media regularly derided as the product of the decadent West, foreign cinema. Westerners of that era liked to imagine the Soviet population full of miserable, fur-hatted laborers and Kafkaesque bureaucrats, but the truth is that the country was home to legions of writers, artists, and designers, all part of a long line of Russian creators dating back hundreds of years with an inquisitive spirit no amount of official repression could stamp out. Alexei's mother was a writer specializing in cinema, which was an especially dubious public platform at the time. On one level, the Soviet state revered the cinematic arts dating back to Sergei Eisenstein and Battleship Potemkin. It considered the moving picture a perfect vehicle for indoctrinating audiences into the empire's official version of communist ideology. But the films of other nations outside the USSR's sphere of influence were immediately suspect. Alexei and his mother were attending the semi-annual Moscow International Film Festival, a special affair that rarely debuted films from the United States, but that still showed works from countries as far-flung as Italy, Germany, and Japan. This was not merely an opportunity to share in an experience few young Muscovites could even imagine at the time. It was a chance for mother and son to quietly thumb their noses at convention, operating under just enough official cover to avoid suspicion. That alone was reason enough for Alexei to be nervous and to scan the line ahead and behind him and the cars parked across the street for the telltale signs of state surveillance. Even a youth with no predilection for counter-revolutionary thought knew that the wrong word overhead in the wrong place at the wrong time could mark not just an individual, but entire families. The Pajitnov family wasn't exactly a collection of true communist believers, but neither were they politically invested in fighting the system. Instead, they were just like the vast majority of Russian families, firmly middle class and preoccupied with day-to-day survival, keeping their heads down and food on the table. His family did instill in Alexei a worldly appreciation for popular and artistic culture, both foreign and domestic. The smattering of films from non-communist countries slotted in between locally produced melodramas and the imported copycat work from satellite states such as Poland and Hungary were always especially thrilling. Moscow International Film Festival screenings of works such as Confessions of Police Captain from Italy and Live Today, Die Tomorrow from Japan mixed high and low art, connecting film festival attendees to the greater world beyond Moscow. Sometimes Alexei would take his mother's passes and attend screening after screening, filling his days with back-to-back movies. Often he saw his own austere homeland reflected back, but also he had a rare opportunity to peek past the Iron Curtain and into the world beyond. Away from the generally tolerated excesses of the Moscow International Film Festival, Alexei had another, guiltier pleasure, the action-packed exploits of James Bond. Following the on-screen antics of the suave super spy